As Neil alluded, we're preaching this sermon series called AFTERGLOW, and it's a sermon series that we actually were talking about maybe even a year and a half ago. This was something that I kind of brought up, and Neil and I talked about it, and we didn't know we would be preaching it together. But the sermon series is built on a basic idea, that the resurrection was powerful then, when Jesus was raised, and it was powerful in that first 40 hours when he was talking with people, and it's powerful now, right? We get Jesus, preachers get Jesus and Paul mixed up. We say Jesus when we mean Paul, or we say Paul when we mean Peter. But Paul says in Romans that the gospel is God's power, that this message that Neil alluded to in Ephesians 2 is powerful, that when it gets into somebody's heart, they experience a mini resurrection that's pointed at, one day, a physical resurrection. And so what we've been wanting to do is look at these powerful moments in this just a little shy of a couple of days, where Jesus has these one-on-one conversations with his people, his disciples, one-on-ones. And he goes into irreversible situations, because that's what the resurrection is, right? The resurrection, I'm going to move the TV just a little bit. The resurrection is, by definition, the reversal of an irreversible situation, right? That by definition, when somebody dies, it's over. But in Christ, Jesus has the power to go into the ultimate irreversible and turn it around. And so what we're wanting to do is trace that concept into 4 irreversible situations. The irreversible situation of the downward trajectory of sadness that Mary gets into, as we'll see here in just a little bit. The irreversible fear that the disciples are shut up for fear of the Jews, and Jesus shows up and turns that. The irreversible doubt, so on and so forth. So for the next few weeks, we're going to keep moving into those irreversible situations that Jesus, by his resurrection power, brings about a reversal. And so what I'd like to do, I know we've been doing the standing and the sitting and the standing and the sitting. Maybe if you've got Roman Catholic roots, this feels a little bit like Mass, rising and standing, but it's not in Latin, so you can't understand what we're saying. But I want to invite you to stand again as we read God's word again. And we've read this story a lot, but we're going to read it again until it sinks in. I'm going to begin in verse 10 of John 20. It says, "The disciples went back to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb, crying. And as she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They've taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they've put him.' And at this she turned around, and she saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize it was Jesus. 'Woman,' he said, 'why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?' Thinking he was the gardener, she said, 'Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you've put him, and I will get him.' And Jesus said to her, 'Mary.' And she turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, 'Rabboni!' And Jesus said, 'Don't hold on to me. I've not yet returned to the Father, but go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am returning to my Father and your Father, to my God and to your God.' And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, 'I've seen the Lord.' And she told them that he had said these things to her." You can be seated. And we've already said that this is an irreversible situation that only the resurrection can walk into. Only the resurrection can walk into this kind of a sadness, this kind of a loss, and do anything about it, do any sort of reversal. Mary, as we alluded to fairly recently, is the epitome of devotion. Right? She is the absolute epitome of devotion. So there's this mixture of irreversible sadness. We can only imagine what we call Holy Saturday, right? Must have been like for her. Holy Saturday was not Holy Saturday. Holy Saturday was a day to rest, and rather than rejoice, was to just sit in the crushing grief that you can do nothing about. Have you ever been there? Have you been there? And everything that you've thought to do to keep yourself busy from having to just sit in the loss and come to grips with the fact you can do nothing about this. She sat for an entire day to obey God, to obey the Sabbath. And she felt the weight of irreversible sorrow that she could do nothing about. And yet, like many women and some men, she wants to do something about it. So after the day of rest, she goes to the tomb. And again, we're not really sure why. None of the other disciples are going to the tomb, but her and then the other gospel authors tell us some other women were there too. So she's not the only one, but John keys in on her because he wants to show us this conversation. She goes to the tomb, and I wonder if it's just to show her, pay her respects, just to get out the grief that maybe she'd been letting out all day at the Sabbath, but she maybe just went there just to cry more, let more out, just to grieve and to show her devotion. And the thing I love about that is the devotion. She was into Jesus' death so devoted. She shows how faithful and loving she is to Jesus. And yet, what John wants to show us is that Mary's devotion wasn't an issue. It wasn't the issue that John wants us to key in on here. That devotion's not the thing. In fact, Mary doesn't have a devotion problem at all. Or we're going to find in 3 weeks there were some disciples that did have a devotion problem. Right? Peter had a devotion problem, didn't he? Lord, I will go to you to the end. And Jesus is like, no, you won't. You have a devotion problem, and Neil's going to deal with that in 3 weeks, right? So there's an irreversible thing that Peter needs reversed in his life to go from undevoted to devoted, but not Mary. It's not a devotion issue. It's something else. And if I could just say this, we don't seem to have a devotion issue here. Now, I'm the new guy. I've only been here 2 weeks, just getting to learn names, and you're being very gracious to me when I call you Bob and your name's Tim, or I say Sally and you say Sue, or whatever. So thank you for being gracious to me. But what I can see, I've been in ministry coming on 20 years, I can see when there's no devotion. In fact, a study just came out, Christianity Today just published. You want to know what the number one thing that crushes pastors is? It's not the Monday morning email, though that is frustrating. You want to know what the number one thing that is causing pastors to leave the pastorate by the droves? It's apathy. It's not caring. It's coming and being here, but just kind of, Mary doesn't have a devotion problem. That's not the issue. And I don't think we have an issue with devotion. And you want to know how I know? Because as far as I can tell, we have people like Paula and others. I mean, there's a whole crew of gals that I'm going to get their names wrong, Jenny and others. They've been teaching in the children's ministry for decades. Decades. We've got a missionary doctor here that was the first missionary to Africa. And Bob, I don't know if I'm going to get this right, but like 4 decades plus? Are you in the house, Bob? Where are you? 40 years. Into Africa as a missionary doctor. And you know what he does when he comes back? He kicks up his feet and doesn't do anything. Right. Now he's one of the leaders of our building and grounds crew, and he's so devoted to our building and grounds crew that he sends Paul into our office to fix the pencil sharpener because it's not quite working right. We don't have a devotion issue. Neil and I were in an Orange conference that was in Atlanta. We watched it online because I said, I don't want to fly to Atlanta this week. And I don't know if I could just pick it up in your voice. It was like, why not? I'm ready to get out of town. And I'm like, I don't want to fly to Atlanta. So we got up and we were here at 5 a.m. and we were staring at the TV for a long time. And one of the days, I think it was on Friday, Neil and I went out to breakfast, even though it felt like lunch because it was 9, but we'd been staring at the TV for 5 hours. Let's go get some lunch. It's 9 o'clock. Let's go get some breakfast. And when we left, Scotty came here and was string trimming, just doing a little edging, except that when I left at 3, he was still doing a little bit of edging. Friends, I don't think we have a devotion problem or an issue. And I'm going to go out on a limb and maybe say it as the new guy, because I can maybe say things that I can get away with. We might not have a devotion issue, but we might have and we might not have. So there's my thing. But what we might have, not as a church family, though maybe, but maybe us as individuals, we might not have a devotion problem or issue, but we might have a vision problem or issue. We might have a vision problem. And what I want to propose to us this morning is this story isn't about devotion. That's not the irreversible thing that Jesus is trying to get to in Mary's heart. She's plenty devoted. What Jesus is trying to get to in her heart is a vision thing. You want to know how I know that? Because in 10 verses, and if you go all the way back to the start of the chapter, John, the author, uses see and saw and realized 10 times, 9 times actually, but I'm going to round up. 9 times. They came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been rolled away. They came and looked in and saw that the garments had been set down and that the face garment had been folded up. Mary came in and looked and saw the 2 angels. She looked up and she saw somebody who she thought was the gardener, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. Seeing, not realizing. And some of these words, not all of them, but some of them don't just mean like simply look at. It means to take an account of, to really look at, right? When Peter goes in to look and see, he's not going, oh yeah, the face garments. He's looking at the face garments, and the word literally, blepo, means he's processing. Why in the world would the face garment be folded up so nice and neat and clean? He's looking, but he's thinking, he's processing. Everybody is looking in on this scene, and they can't see it. I mean, they should be able to see it. If you read Mark's gospel, in Mark 8, 9, and 10, Jesus tells his disciples in each of those chapters, I am going to die. The Son of Man is going to Jerusalem to be crucified, and 3 days later he will be raised. And he told them over and over again, and we're told in Mark and in the other gospel accounts, they just didn't have a category for that. They didn't have hope. But he told them, and they still couldn't see it, right? Mary is going to the tomb, and she is devoted, but who is she looking for? She's looking for a closed tomb. She's looking for a Jesus, but who is she? She's looking for a dead Jesus. She's expecting to see she's not looking for it. She's looking for a closed tomb. She's expecting to know about and mourn a dead Jesus. She's so devoted to that idea, she can't see and she can't hear and she can't pull back to the many times Jesus said in his ministry, I'm going to die and then I'm going to rise. She is so devoted to a dead Jesus, she can't see a resurrected one. Can I go out on a limb again and maybe propose to us that if devotion isn't our issue, but vision is, I would maybe even go out and say, devotion might even be blinding our vision. We might be so devoted to the wrong Jesus, we can't see the real one. We might be so devoted to a Jesus that we think we see clearly, right? We're so devoted, and because we're so devoted, that's who Jesus is. And yet Jesus, over and over and over again, is trying to get us to see him for who he really is. Is your devotion blinding your vision? I don't know. When you go to your Jesus, what are you expecting to see? Because the emphasis is on seeing. What are you expecting? What are you expecting to see? We need Jesus' help. So we need his help. And Jesus is he's so gracious in this passage, and Jesus is, he's disciplining Mary a little bit, but he's doing it very, very gently. And God throughout Scripture does this over and over again. If you read those accounts where God talks to a prophet, Jonah, or talks to even Adam and Eve, or to even Cain, or a lot of times he'll just ask a question. He doesn't come out and just hammer them, but he just asks a question to gently take them where maybe they don't want to go, right? Adam and Eve, where are you? To Jonah, do you do well to be upset that I didn't destroy the city? To Mary, who are you looking for? She's so devoted to a dead Jesus. I'm looking for Jesus. But she's looking for the wrong one. She's looking for a dead Jesus. And friends, brothers, sisters, how many times are we looking, but we can't see the Jesus, the real Jesus? We're devoted to a weak Jesus, or an anxious Jesus, or a Jesus that isn't sovereign, or a Jesus that isn't powerful, or a Jesus that isn't smart, or a Jesus that isn't kind, or forgiving, or loving. And man, we're devoted, but we're so devoted, and we think Jesus this is what you are, and that's why I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you, and I'm anxious because you're anxious, and I'm scared because you're scared. And so it's not a devotion issue, but it might be a vision issue. Jesus does two things to gently lead Mary out of this irreversible sorrow, this irreversible sadness, this uninformed devotion that just doesn't quite see it all. He does two things. He asks her a question, and he says her name. He asks her a question, and he says her name. He asks her the same question that the angels asked, that she saw, right? She saw. In fact, I highlighted all the seeing words, and boy, they jump off the page when you highlight them. He asks the same question. He asks what the angels asked. The angels asked, "Woman, why are you crying? Why are you crying?" "Because I'm looking for Jesus. He's dead." Jesus comes on. It's the same sentence. "Woman, why are you crying?" But see, he asks another question. "Who are you looking for?" He's teasing her into seeing the real Jesus, maybe even seeing the Jesus that she came to, but isn't there, to see the real Jesus. Who are you looking for? Who are you looking for? He asks the question, and then he says her name, Mary. And it isn't until he says her name, right, that it says she sees him. She realizes that it's not just the gardener, it's Jesus. So he asks the question, and he says her name. Anybody watch The Chosen? Don't be afraid. I know you stream Amazon Prime. Don't be afraid. Young and old. It's all good. My wife got me this shirt, Get Used to Different. She got it for me for my birthday because I just love that line in the scene. It's toward the end of season 1, where if you've watched the series, it's this beautiful Bible project. And I think they're on season 3, right? I haven't even gotten through season 2, but my wife says season 2 is really good. Don't spoiler alert me, okay? But at the end of season 1, if you've watched the character buildup of Matthew's kind of one of those on the spectrum sort of types, and it's a fascinating character development of him. And you see how the disciples that Jesus has already called, you see these interchanges with Matthew and how they hate Matthew because he's a tax collector. And toward the end of season 1, as they're walking by the tax collection booth, Gaius is talking with Matthew, and they're having some small talk about going to the Parthian Games or not, because Matthew didn't go, and et cetera, et cetera. And Jesus and his little band of developing disciples walk by. And Jesus looks at Matthew and keeps walking. And then he stops, and the disciples stop. And he goes back and he says, Matthew. And Matthew does this. Me? And Jesus goes, he laughs. He goes, yeah, you, Matthew, son of Alphaeus, follow me. And Peter, do you remember what Peter says? Whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing? Do you know what he's done? Do you know him? And Jesus goes, I know what he's done, and I know him. He says, yeah, but this is different. And Jesus says, get used to different. Get used to different. What we need, friends, if we're on a trajectory of sorrow, maybe it's a deep trajectory, or maybe it's just one of those old sorrows that, quite frankly, you will never shake fully until Jesus comes back, right? There's some sorrows that will... This isn't a fix, right? We're not talking about if you do this, suddenly you will be full of joy that stamps out all the hard times. No, there are some losses that you will never have fully repaired until the resurrection. And yet, if you feel that, Jesus is here to promise you a joy even in the midst of that will give you some measure, maybe more of a measure of joy than you could ever imagine based on the sorrow you've been carrying around. Jesus says, get used to different. That we might be coming to a Jesus and we are very devoted to him. We give lots of time and lots of energy, but it's the wrong Jesus. We can't see the real Jesus, and we need Jesus to say, you don't see me. I'm alive. I've come to bring joy. I've come to give you life, and it's here. And Mary is so excited. Jesus is trying to, he's peeling her off of him. I haven't yet ascended. We need to maybe hear the question, and we need to hear our name, don't we? So I want to conclude with that. You and I need to get used to different, don't we? We've been devoted to one Jesus, and maybe, though not indefinitely, maybe we need a fresh vision. We need Jesus to say, who are you looking for when you go to him this week in prayer? We might need him to shake us and say, who are you looking for? Corey and Marcus. Who are you looking for? Erica.